I firmly believe someone out there knows something. Someone out there saw something, heard something. We need that person to call us.
Has there been any evidence so far that Nancy is still alive, or is it just hope of investigators and the family?
There's been no evidence that she's not.
Investigators are now turning to genetic genealogy testing in the search for Nancy Guthrie. This is the same cutting-edge tool that has cracked other very high-profile cases. Plus, was Nancy Guthrie's disappearance a one-person job, or was it a team effort? We're breaking down the possibility of accomplices. And a Maui hike turned into a nightmare. A doctor accused of trying to push his wife off a cliff. The Trouble in Paradise trial is now just weeks away. Also, quote, how do you kill your dad? That's what the alleged Appalachia High School shooter apparently searched for before the mass shooting. Now his dad is on trial for allegedly missing the warning signs. So how is the state of Georgia doing so far? We'll talk about it. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Friday morning to you, my friends. TGIF. I'm Julie Grant, and this is Opening Statements, and we're so glad you're waking up with us this morning. We got a big show planned, so let's get it started as we always do. Grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. The Black Swan committed a battery? That's what the Florida Department of Corrections says. They say that convicted killer Ashley Benefield committed a battery on a corrections officer, and that the incident has landed her locked up in disciplinary confinement within the prison. I can't say I'm surprised that the bold ballerina would allegedly exhibit such violent behavior. We know she committed the crime of manslaughter when she unlawfully took the life of her estranged husband, Doug, by shooting him to death. The Black Swan is no shrinking violet, but she better fall in line soon, because she's got a 20-year stretch that she's got to do for killing Doug. And now she might also face charges for the alleged battery on the corrections officer. I think the lesson is the Black Swan should have stuck to ballet, because then she wouldn't have become a jailbird. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, time for your daily docket.
This is an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle.
And approximately how much would this kind of weapon cost?
It's going to be around probably $1,000. Yeah, 7.25 pounds, which is essentially the amount of force it takes for this firearm to discharge when pulling the trigger.
Okay. And can you give us kind of something of an analogous weight to sort of quantify what that would feel like?
Yeah, so like a gallon of milk is about 8 pounds.
So we've got testimony resuming in our next hour in the trial of defendant and father Colin Gray. Today could potentially be when the state of Georgia rests. We'll go there live together when it starts. In Michigan, we've got the state's case continuing in the trial of defendant Dale Warner. Court gets underway at 9 a.m. Eastern. And also happening in Michigan, we've got the sentencing of defendant Desmond Burks. This is expected to start at 9 a.m. Eastern time. He pleaded guilty to murdering Detroit neurosurgeon Dr. Devin Hoover. Right now, though, we turn to your top story. Thousands of tips pouring in, and hundreds of law enforcement officials are working the case, and yet still no sign of Nancy Guthrie. It's been nearly 3 weeks now since the 84-year-old vanished from her Tucson home. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released an update on Thursday. Quote, lab analysis continues on biological evidence, DNA, found at Nancy Guthrie's residence. The only item that's been positively identified is the Ozark backpack. The FBI has received more than 20,000 tips to date. Now, we know DNA from an unknown man was found at Nancy Guthrie's house, and investigators are using genetic genealogy testing. Could that be key to cracking this case wide open? Let's talk about it. Let's bring in our law enforcement experts guests. I want to welcome in the sheriff in Erie County, Pennsylvania, Chris Campanelli, is with us, and so is retired police lieutenant Mike Gould. Good morning to you both. We've heard about genetic genealogical testing solving two of the biggest cases of our time. The Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, out in California, that former police officer who wouldn't have been caught but for that trash pull and the testing. And then also Brian Kohberger with the Idaho 4 student murders and how he wouldn't have gotten caught except for the trash pull and then the testing that showed spawn of Papa Kohberger was on that knife sheath. So when we think about how it cracked 2 big cases, is there hope here in the Guthrie case? Lieutenant Gould, would you kick off our conversation, please?
Yes, certainly. Good morning, Julie. Yeah, hope is eternal, right? Hope and prayer is eternal. Strategy is something different. Investigative strategy is something different. Yeah, of course. And genetic genealogy very well may be, but it's not going to happen tomorrow in this case. Once you start to resort to these more complicated DNA analysis, it just frankly takes time to do it. So, of course, there's hope. There's hope with every bit of evidence, but as time wanes, we're 19, 20 days into this. If you would have asked me when this happened, if we'd be still discussing this, I would have lost a bet on that because I just thought, based on all the digital stuff, that this would have come to a conclusion a little sooner. But of course, this could go on for months and months and years. And again, that's why I'm optimistic with the canine and dog research and dog searching for it. But yeah, of course, genealogy. It's a little bit out of my lane, but and I'm sure your other guest will be able to shed more light on that.
You know, if someone did use one of those sites like 23andMe or something, and if they're related to this perp, Sheriff Campanelli, tell us, how much hope do you think there is for something like that to happen here to break the case?
Good morning, Julie. Yeah, and I agree with Mike. I think the genealogy and the biological testing, it's going to be a very slow process, as we all know. I think it absolutely is. It's going to pan out to something positive or negative. I think their sheriff's office is doing the right thing right now. They're not jumping the gun on anything. They're moving slowly, one step at a time, until they find out they have some evidence one way or the other.
Right. You know, speaking of their sheriff's office, I wanted to play a clip for you, Sheriff. So this was reported by Fox News. Jonathan Hunt, one of their reporters who's been there in Tucson covering this case, shared that the Pima County Sheriff's Department is going to be using polygraph tests. Let's take a listen to what was reported again on Fox News.
We can report that polygraph testing has been taking place here at the Sheriff's Department today. It is unclear at this point how many individuals have been tested or their identities, and the Sheriff's Office will not confirm at this point that the testing is related to the Guthrie case, but significantly, they did not deny that either.
Sheriff Campanelli, what are your thoughts on this, if it is related to the Guthrie case?
If it is related to the case, I mean, it's a good way to get a direction. But as we know, the polygraph it's not admissible in court. So how much weight does it really hold? It can point you in a direction, but I don't think it answers any questions.
Sure. And then admissibility issues later on in the courtroom, right? So maybe a good tool to use in the investigative process, but not dispositive. Sheriff, thank you for that. Lieutenant, I want you to take a look at something. Let's talk about the backpack here. So apparently investigators are working with Walmart on this Ozark backpack. They're trying to develop some leads by talking with Walmart management. They're saying that this Ozark Trail Hiker pack is sold exclusively at Walmart stores. And it's the only clothing item on that perp that's been definitively identified. Lieutenant, your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, Julie, I think that is a very critical, what I would call a breadcrumb, because that's what we have here. We have breadcrumbs, circumstantial things that hopefully will complete this puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that has to come together by all of these various different investigative tools, including polygraph. Just on a side, and I agree with the sheriff, you know, polygraphs, if you asked me today to take a polygraph, I'd probably deny it. deny to do that. So that sometimes I just feel law enforcement now looks at me as a stronger suspect now because I don't want to take a polygraph for the facts we talked about. They're not admissible in court. So personally, that would be my decision. So does that make me a more likely suspect? So that's the only problem. It's a great investigative tool, but I don't like when people, if you're given your Amanda rights and you don't answer questions, does that make me a greater suspect? And I'm just using my constitutional rights not to speak. So these types of things just worry me sometimes in investigations when we jump to conclusions too prematurely.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, great points, Lieutenant. Sheriff, I want to go back to you. Just general thoughts on the case and the way this scene was processed. You know, we saw the quick release of the crime scene at the start. And then we saw the return and the return and the return to do more processing. And of course, that raises the question of whether there's been contamination and whether there's any coming back from that, whether evidence might have been lost. I would love for you to weigh in on that aspect of this, please.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely that if they're returning to the scene, and it happens in every case, I believe, you know, you're going to return to the scene to do more forensic evidence. But every time you enter that scene, you're contaminating it more and more. And I think with each attempt they make, they're going to make it a little more difficult for themselves. And it is possible they could miss something. Hopefully they have the resources and the equipment to do everything the right way. So that's really the secret to it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And now it seems like they've got all the resources. Just makes you wonder, is it too little, too late? Don't know. We shall see. We're going to continue the conversation. I've got to hit a break. Sheriff, Lieutenant, stand by, please. Friends at home, get some more coffee. More on the search for Nancy Guthrie.
Suspects. I know there's been a lot out there about suspects, and I want to be very clear. At this time, we have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case.
So is it one suspect or more? We're weighing the possibility of accomplices. Plus, a Hawaii doctor is accused of trying to kill his wife by pushing her off a cliff. Defendant Gerhardt Konig tried to get the case thrown out, but the judge wasn't buying it.
In 2021, Dee Warner vanished without a trace.
Dale Warner. He's accused of murdering his wife, Dee.
Rumors of a troubled marriage spread throughout this small community.
She had contemplated divorce several times.
Now, after years of searching for Dee Warner,
her remains are found on the couple's property, sealed inside a welded shut storage tank.
We're still going to fight to the end to see that she gets her justice.
The hidden murder of Dee Warner. Live coverage today on Court TV.
First of all, the sheriff's theories don't really matter. Okay. It's those who are investigating this case, their theories, their thoughts, and they share that and work that together as a team. And all of those possibilities are something we all look at and consider. But it'd be very irresponsible of me to give out certain key pieces of this case so that the public can know.
Well, the FBI seems to be taking the lead on the investigation. It's information from Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos that continues trending. According to CBS News, Sheriff Nanos believes that investigators have not ruled out an accomplice who aided the suspected kidnapper, who we see in that doorbell camera video outside of Nancy Guthrie's home the night that she vanished. CBS News also reporting that investigators have been using a tracking device known as a signal sniffer in an effort to detect possible signals from the 84-year-old's pacemaker. Now, authorities have not identified a suspect or even a person of interest in the case. So what are the next steps to breaking the case? Let's bring back in our law enforcement expert guests. The sheriff in Erie County, Pennsylvania, Sheriff Chris Campanelli, and retired police lieutenant and canine expert Mike Gould. Lieutenant, I'll start with you. You touched on this earlier, and when we talk about the next steps and we're hearing about this signal sniffer, I keep thinking of the dogs who sniff that you and I, and I'm sure Sheriff Chris, love so much. Talk to us here, please, about how dogs can help out at this point in time.
Right, Julie. So when I ran the canine unit in Nassau County, I used to challenge, we'd have a friendly bet between the Air Bureau, who had thermal imaging devices and all kinds of technology, and I would use our dogs on the ground, and we'd hide somebody in the middle of the woods, kind of playing hide and seek, and which technology was best. I've never lost. The dog was always like a odor-seeking heat missile that would find odor immediately. The sniffer device is really not, it's not a sniffer. It detects transmissions from Bluetooth devices, but it's not new. It's been used in the military and it's been used in the past. So, again, I have a bias towards dogs. They are admissible in court, by the way, as scientific instruments, just as, although polygraphs aren't. I think that's an interesting fact. So I do have a bias. I've seen it with in fact, as I said, I'm going to be looking for a missing person that disappeared 25 years ago. As soon as the ground thaws, and I'm very optimistic, we're going to locate her, her remains, obviously, that's been there for 25 years. So I got a bias. I'm sorry, Julie. The truth is we humans don't understand how a dog can smell things that are invisible to us. So that's the challenge. And even including law enforcement, we just don't have that ability to relate to that fact that dogs can sniff invisible odor.
Yes, I'm with you. I've been a big advocate for canines everywhere, Lieutenant. How I wish every department could have many, many canines serving. They can do what even the very best, most capable officer just cannot do because of their capabilities, as you described. It's amazing. Sheriff Campanelli, I see you nodding here. Your thoughts on what should come next in order to break this case? What do you think that these investigators ought to be doing, please?
Honestly, they need to do as much as they can. Any option that they have, they should be trying at this point. The Bluetooth technology that Mike was talking about is amazing stuff. The canines, if there's a way to use a canine in this situation, I think they would be foolish not to at least try it. Their track records are amazing, and it's undeniable they're valuable.
Yeah, the canines, I mean, when I think about that, I think, my gosh, what they can do. And Lieutenant, we're 3 weeks out. Might there still be sense there at that house?
Completely, and the sheriff touched on this before. For dogs, there's a sweet spot. Right now, the area is contaminated. Sadly, if this becomes simply a recovery rather than a rescue, once that's determined, and truthfully, the interest of the investigators kind of wane. So there's a sweet spot in temperature, environment. So when the dust settles, I did my best work when investigators were gone, people trampling around. We had this problem at 9/11. Once they're gone, the dogs are going to hunt like my dog hunts bones in the backyard in the spring when the weather breaks. My dog's like a beeline to the bones he buried last year, not by writing it down in his iPhone. And he'll find those bones that have been buried under the snow in about 2 minutes, soon as the ground thaws. So my point is, for dogs, there is this sweet spot of temperature and environment. When people are done trampling around, many times our pet at home, honestly, could detect odor anomalies, right? Your dog does that in your backyard every day. He goes back and smells the scent that was left yesterday. So I'm optimistic of the recovery. Sadly, the rescue, as time goes on, we have to be more pragmatic than, prayers, I hope. I'd love for Nancy to knock on my front door right now. But pragmatically, when it shifts to a recovery, we're going to be better off.
Mm-hmm. Right, Lieutenant. Thank you for the explainer. Sheriff, in terms of the search area, we touched on this yesterday on the show, and it's worth a repeat. What do you think the likelihood is that Nancy Guthrie is still in Arizona? Or is she out of the country at this point? Sheriff Campanelli, I'd love your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I think we all hope that she's alive and well and still in our country. I read an article about crossing the border into Mexico, and that we have contact with them, and they've just figured that she has not been taken to Mexico. That's the last thing that I read about it, and honestly, I don't think she would have left the country. I can only hope after this amount of time that she's alive and well. And let's start there and continue the search.
Right. Does it seem to you both, I want to ask you about this question, that this may have been carried out by someone local in Tucson? And why I ask that question is because the first place we saw these purported ransom notes popping up was with local media, and then to TMZ, and of course TMZ really got all the traction because of the national reach. But I'm just wondering what you think in terms of where this might have originated, if it was from someone in the area and multiple persons perhaps that carried this out. Lieutenant.
Yeah, Julie. So speculation, I'm losing in the speculation battle, so I'd like to just stick with the facts. So the facts is that this kidnapping of this nature is not typical at all. Kidnappings are motivated by money or political ideology. They want money. They don't communicate in the media. They communicate directly with the family. Yeah, and I do believe there may, of course, be an accomplice one way or the other. Maybe not on the scene of the actual scene. We don't know. But I certainly think there may be an accomplice, and somebody for sure knows who this person is. Whether they're going to come forward or not is another question. But, I never really bought into the notes on TMZ. I think these are opportunists looking to extort money from people, or just whatever. They could be 16-year-old kids in their mother's basement, frankly, using AI to develop these very sophisticated ransom notes. But again, I like to stick with the facts and not speculate on, if she's at Area 51 by Martians or something. There's just too much speculation, and I need to just stick with the facts of the case.
Sure. And going back through that, Sheriff Campanelli, when we think about Nancy Guthrie's mobility issues, she can't walk very far without assistance. And we talked about this on the program early on. I believe it was Manuel Gomez who said, firmly, he said, I can tell you for sure there's at least one other person, because somebody had to have been in a car nearby, was what he was saying, in order for this, the perp we see on the porch might have gone in and grabbed her up, and there had to have been somebody in a getaway car. Your thoughts on that theory, Sheriff? Can we assume that at least two people did this?
Well, Julie, honestly, I would never like to assume anything. Honestly, I think, most likely there would probably be a second person involved. It'd be hard to remove that person from their home, get them to a vehicle without somebody seeing something. So, I mean, I think, I know they're all looking through like these Ring doorbell things and all this throughout the area. There are any cameras that they have available to them. But I think it would be difficult for one person, especially a person that can't be very mobile. It would be difficult for one person to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Boy, I love talking to you both. You know that. Thank you for your expertise on the show and your service. Sheriff Chris Campanelli, Lieutenant Mike Gould, thank you kindly. We're going to hit a break. Still to come here on opening statements, Dr. Gerhardt Konig. Now, defendant Gerhardt Konig, he's accused of trying to murder his wife. He tried to get the case dismissed. He was unsuccessful. We'll break that down. Plus,
was there a second search after the word abuse?
Yes. It was how to kill your dad.
When you were talking to Colin Gray, did he mention anything to you about 2 years before the police coming to his house?
No.
Okay. Did he mention anything about Colt searching how to kill your dad on the computer?
No.
How to Kill Your Dad, the search that alleged high school shooter Colt Gray made, and his dad apparently ignored. At least that's the argument from the state of Georgia. We'll talk about whether they're proving their case. Welcome back. This morning, we're giving a voice to victims after a judge refused to dismiss charges in the case of a doctor accused of trying to push his wife off a cliff in Hawaii. Gerhardt Konig is accused of attempted second-degree murder after police say he bashed his wife's head with a rock and tried to inject her with syringes filled with unknown substances. Now his trial is set to go in March. Ariel Konig said that her husband expressed extreme jealousy and accused her of having an affair. She's expected to testify against him at his trial. She did request that a temporary restraining order be dropped back in May, since Konig is being held in jail without any bail, pending the start of his trial. Here's Court TV's Ted Rowlands with more on the background of the case.
The point being, this is going to be a he said, she said trial.
The he in this case is Dr. Gerhardt Konig, an anesthesiologist charged with attempted murder of his wife Ariel, a nuclear engineer. She's accusing him of trying to throw her off a cliff in Hawaii.
This is an allegation made by his wife, who has now filed for divorce and is seeking full custody of their young children.
36-year-old Ariel Konig told Oahu police her husband suggested that for her birthday they take a hike on a scenic trail. She says he brought her to the edge of a lookout on March 24th where he tried to push her off a cliff. And when that failed, prosecutors allege that Konig made 2 more attempts to kill his wife.
He tried to stab her with syringes, and then he moved on to his third way of trying to hit her with a rock.
Ariel told police her husband first became enraged on their hike when she refused to take a selfie near the edge of a 1,200-foot drop. According to court documents, Konig yelled at her to come back when she refused. He then pushed her into the bushes, and that's when a struggle began. 2 hikers intervened after hearing screams for help. They recalled seeing Konig over Ariel with a rock. They say that is when he stopped. Police say 46-year-old Konig fled the scene, sparking an 8-hour manhunt through dense brush. And during that time, he FaceTimed his adult son.
He told his son that he tried to kill Ariel. Second, he gave his son the reason for why, that she'd been cheating on him.
Dr. Konig's attorney says this is not as one-sided as it may seem.
No syringes found on the hike, on the trail, anywhere near there, and you can bet your bottom dollar they searched that place very, very carefully.
Ariel Konig has since filed for divorce and initially obtained a restraining order claiming months of abuse, control, and jealousy leading up to the attack. The order was later dismissed, citing Konig's no-bail custody status.
Ms. Konig's doing well. She's still recovering. She still has some injuries, but she's spending time with her family. She just wants to get back to some semblance of her normal life.
Dr. Gerhardt Konig remains held without bail. He has pled not guilty. If convicted, he faces a lifetime in prison.
Ted Rowlands reporting there for us. So what will this trial look like? And what do the dynamics look like here between this defendant and the victim? Let's bring in licensed clinical social worker and author Sherry Botwin. Sherry, good morning. Nice to see you. Tell us
so
what
good
these...
to see you.
Oh, thank you kindly. And these facts, they're awful. They're scary. Thank God she survived. Tell us what the allegations say to you, you know, as an expert in this area. Tell us what the facts tell you about what might have been going on that dreadful day.
What the facts tell me is we're looking at a man allegedly who has some major serious pathology. Sounds like he was very controlling. He was very calculated in the way that he acted and reacted. Honestly, when I'm listening to the facts now, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is such a scary situation. It's a miracle this woman survived this.
You're right, my friend. You're absolutely right. You know, I think it's largely doing credit to those good Samaritans, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, Sherry, who just happened to be going by and see this. I mean, this was an area that was open and busy, and thank God there were people who jumped in and started yelling and calling 911 and interceded. Domestic violence, it's so tough. Don't know the history between this couple. We have no idea. But Sherry, generally, when we think about it, these crimes always scared me so much because they're crimes of violence, but oftentimes done in secret. Would you speak to that, please?
That's one of the things that stands out about this case, that they might have been in a secluded area, but clearly a couple of women heard her screaming. So it's one of those cases that we really don't hear a lot about, because usually it's behind closed doors and there's no way out. So in this particular case, there's so much evidence. There's going to be testimony, I imagine, by these women that heard her screaming and potentially saved her life. And that is not common in cases of domestic violence.
Yeah, you're right, Sherry, you're right. They were like guardian angels, really. And now when we get to the trial, which is going to come up fast, as you know, March, trial date set, the judge said no dismissal, it's going. We know that Ariel Konig is going to be called as a witness and have to testify against her husband. Would you speak to what that is like, to have to be in that position and confront someone who allegedly tried to do you such grave harm?
It's terrifying. And what I'm thinking about is, in order to confront your perpetrator in court, usually what happens for survivors is they have to use those same defense mechanisms they used when they were being abused. I imagine she's going to be in survival mode. She's probably going to have a ton of flashbacks, but she's going to need to be able to speak and find words. So for her, it might be one of those things where she's not even fully in the room. She may not be able to stay in her body, but she will be fully prepared, I would imagine, by her attorneys. And she'll figure out, with a lot of support, how do I get through this? How do I tell the story of this horrible experience that happened to me? And then once she steps off the stand, that's when she can actually begin to heal and process what happened to her.
Right. And that healing, as you know, it takes time. Thank goodness for clinicians like yourself who provide treatment and therapy support for people like her. And God bless her. Let's hope that she has a healing process that's effective and safe and comfortable for her. We wish her all the best. And again, the trial's set to go in March. Sherry Botwin, always wonderful to have you in this program. Thank you for your expertise. We'll see you soon. And friends at home, don't go anywhere. We're going to hit a break. And as we do go to break, we want to remember the victim. That's what we do on this show. We're a voice for victims here on Opening Statements. So this morning, let's send our love and our light and our support to Ariel Konig. She's also the mother of 2 young children, in addition to having been a wife. And thank God she survived this terrifying ordeal. We wish her the very best. We'll be right back.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Corey, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage begins Monday morning, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
My little girl just texted me. She's in middle school. She said, we're in lockdown. I'm like, God almighty, please tell me better. Please tell me. Why do you think that? Why would you think that? We're trying to get him into counseling. He just didn't fit in last year at high school, so we let him do online school. We brought him back into just doing normal school this year, and it was going okay.
The pressure is building in the high-profile murder trial for Father Colin Gray. But is the state of Georgia checking off all the necessary boxes to prove second-degree murder? Gray is facing a jury in connection to his son's alleged actions during the 2024 shooting at Appalachia High School. Live court set to begin at the top of the hour, and on Thursday, testimony focused on administrators from Colt Gray's former schools, as prosecutors are pointing to Dad Colin for allegedly overlooking his son's numerous red flags.
Did you know what had happened at Appalachia?
At that time, I was only made aware that there had been an active shooter incident in which multiple people had been injured.
And what happened when you arrived at the residence?
Myself and Deputy Bazinet approached the residence. He knocked on the front door. I went to the side entrance near the garage carport area.
And did someone come out?
Yes.
Okay. And who was it that came out?
It was I believe it's Colin Gray.
And did you say anything to him when he came out?
I explained who we were and that we were there with the Sheriff's Department and that he was not free to leave at that time.
Did he say anything to you?
Yes.
What did he say?
I believe it was something along the lines of he knew something had occurred. His daughter had texted him saying that the school was on lockdown and he was hoping to God that his son hadn't done anything.
Did you ask him any questions about what was in the house?
Yes.
What did you ask him?
I asked him if there were any people, animals, or weapons inside the residence.
And what did he tell you?
He told me there was no other people, no other animals. There were 2 firearms located inside the residence.
What was your purpose to do at that time?
My purpose was to simply detain him until we had additional resources there to do whatever was needed at that residence.
Did the school have any issues with Colt and that online, or not the online, but the at-home learning?
He was not consistent with doing the assignments.
Did something specific happen in August of that year?
Yes. Our district has a program on all the school devices that monitor searches. And if words such as death or guns or drugs or any of those words sort of throws up a flag to the administrative staff and the counselors for us to follow up with.
And did that happen with Colt?
It did.
And what was the word that flagged?
The first word that flagged was abuse.
When was the search done?
The search was done on the night previously, I think. And then when we came in that morning, we saw the alert and we began to follow up on it.
Okay. And was there a second search after the word abuse?
Yes. It was how to kill your dad.
So what do you do about that?
Okay, if he's at school, we would immediately brought him in and talked with him. Since he was not at school, I attempted to get in touch with him, I guess by phone. I did not get a response. I tried to get in touch with his mom. We did not get a response, and so it was decided that we would send a resource officer from the school to the home to make sure that everyone was safe.
And what was your understanding of how things were at the home?
He found everyone to be safe. He talked with Mom, and then came back and let us know that everything was safe.
Do you know whether anyone ever contacted Colin Gray about what his son said?
I did not. I did talk with the mom, and Mom was aware.
Mom was aware, but do you know whether he was ever aware?
I did not talk to him.
There was a situation where he went into actually 2 different restrooms and used markers, and I think a pink marker. He defaced some chalk pens to do graffiti and different things. They were on the walls, the stalls, the toilets, and just sort of destroyed the bathroom that way.
Okay, so this was a little under 3 weeks after he started at the school?
Correct.
Did y'all ever determine what the wording was referencing or what it was or anything like that?
Not really. He was in ISS for 4 days, and we invoiced his parents to help pay for the painting.
Okay, so that was a look back at day 4 of this trial. Remember, the state of Georgia has the burden. Colin Gray is cloaked in the presumption of innocence. So has the state proven its case? And if not, what do they have left to do? Let's bring in criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Bruno. David, good morning to you. Your thoughts on that question, please.
Well, look, this is right on the edge of criminal culpability. We're talking about prosecuting dad for the son's actions and whether or not that was criminal negligence. In Georgia, criminal negligence is 2 prongs. It first requires the reckless disregard of consequences. But more importantly for this conversation, the second part of that is with reasonable foresight that injury will probably result. That is the crux of this case and what prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that the father had the circumstances that led him to believe that it would be probable that his son went in and shot and killed these 4 people and injured 7 others. So it's really on the fine line, and it's going to be interesting. The prosecutor's done a great job of putting evidence about what happened at the school, and now they're at a point where they're trying to prove that he had all of this information so that he should have known that that action was probable.
I appreciate it, Dave. So tell me, in terms of the charging, just backing up a second-degree murder we see here. The only other case we can think of like this was the one in Oakland County, Michigan, where the Crumbly parents, Jennifer and James Crumbly, were prosecuted. They were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, as you know, Dave. We talked a lot about it. Big difference in second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, and the facts are strikingly similar. Do you think this case has been overcharged?
Well, in Georgia, they're actually first charging the second-degree cruelty to children, all right? And that's where that criminal negligence element comes in that I just described. So they get to the second-degree murder on the basis of the cruelty to the children. So the elements on the murders caused the death, and then second, did so in the commission of the child cruelty. So that's where you get to a more purposeful murder versus the involuntary murder that we saw in the Crumbly case.
Sure. Okay, so with that being said, if you're on the defense side of this, what do you do? Do you encourage Colin Gray to testify as a way to save himself here? How do you think this is the most defensible, Dave?
Well, look, on the cross, let's start with cross-examining these witnesses. And that statement, that body cam statement, comes across as problematic for the defense. But the way I would go about that is after the fact. That is not indicative of what was known before, and especially in light of the text message that was received by his daughter about a lockup in school. So he's now he's provided additional information than what he disregarded prior to the shooting. So it's really critical about timelines and what was known, when it was known, to really distinguish so that the jury doesn't get all mixed up and all think it's all about what he knew before.
Right. You know, the thought of this case going before the sons is probably strategic. Dave, tell me, do you like this strategy move by the prosecutor's office, if you're the state of Georgia, to try dad before trying son?
You also got to remember the son was a juvenile. There's a waiver proceeding that had to happen. Procedurally speaking, juveniles generally are in juvenile court and rehabilitation is the purpose. However, on a case like this, they're waived up as adults. So now they had that waiver, and obviously the prosecutor did have a decision to make. This son's case is so much stronger. I mean, anybody, a junior prosecutor, could walk in and try that case. So I'd imagine they want their witnesses fresh. They want to get their best shot first, and they don't want to give dad's attorneys the firepower to see a record on the son's case before his.
Right. Dave, tell me, you know, at the end of all this, any predictions on how this case is going to go?
Again, this is very much on the edge of criminal culpability. Now, this is a theme we've been seeing pretty regularly. I mean, earlier this week, we talked about the dad that gave the 14-year-old the keys that was also convicted. So this is a case that could go either way, and really emotions are so strong in that courtroom, and it's going to be a very awesome responsibility for this jury to consider what was known, what was disregarded, and whether or not that result was probable. That is the biggest element that needs to be overcome by prosecutors, because probable result is a long stretch, especially when we're talking about a school shooting.
David Bruno, thank you so much for weighing in. Great to see you this morning. Friends at home, this trial set to start back up any minute now, so we're going to hit a break and go there live to Georgia after that. We thank you for watching Opening Statements on this Friday morning. If you like the show, watch it again. Go to courttv.com to do that.